Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear brothers and sisters, welcome to Unfiltered Muslim. Today, we are humbled and we are very honored to have exactly such a person, such a scholar who's truly unfiltered, who's truly unafraid. In fact, he's the inspiration behind Unfiltered Muslim. He's the reason we started this channel, to speak the truth, to give voice to the truth in a world of deception. And Sheikh doesn't know this, probably just like many of you other people around the world. I consider him as my Maulana, as my teacher. We are honored to sit with Sheikh Imran Hosein, a scholar who fearlessly has been working, has opened the eyes of this Ummah. And today's interview is based on his book, Jerusalem in the Qur'an, which he wrote for almost 25 years ago. A book that laid out a vision of the world, a vision which has come to pass exactly the way he described it. And yet, sadly, no other scholar, at least to my knowledge, is teaching this subject. So before we start, I have a question for reflection to the Islamic scholars around the world. Where's your backbone? The Ummah is waking up, and we hear your silence. Let that simmer in. And if you haven't already, please, I strongly urge every single one of you, Muslims and non-Muslims, to read Sheikh's books, visit his website, and also watch his lectures. I'm going to put the links in the description box. So welcome, dear Sheikh. Assalamu alaikum. Jazakumullah khair for honoring us with your presence.
Alaikum salam, Brother Waheed. I am very happy to have this chance to speak with you. It is today the 9th day of the month of Muharram in the year 1447, and I am in the mountaintop resort of Jandabike in Malaysia. And I believe you must be somewhere in Europe.
Yes, Maulana. I'm sitting in Sweden, Stockholm, Sweden.
You're in Stockholm in Sweden. Okay.
Yes,
So
yes.
I'm very happy to have this chance to return to Jerusalem in the Quran. And you are right, painfully correct, Brother Waheed, that this book was written 25 years ago. And it is the eschatology created in vain for of Islamic scholarship. And 25 years have passed without such a response. This is something not only mysterious, but something lamentable.
True, true. I totally agree. And I don't know if you noticed it, but during my introduction, it's painful to see that the Islamic scholars are not waking up and don't have the courage, I think, basically, to stand up for what is true and haqq. And one of our goals after actually watching your lectures, you inspired me to not only study the Quran and Hadith and everything, but also geopolitics, riba system, who's actually enslaving this world, this dunya, not only Muslims, but also non-Muslims. I was watching another lecture of you, which I've seen before, where we were talking about, they told us that slavery ended. But did it actually end? And before it was only maybe our African brothers who were enslaved. But in the world we're living in now, everybody's enslaved by the elite and by the system. And we're so honored and so happy to have a scholar like you who's been standing alone in this war.
Yes, the world would like us to believe that slavery has now been abolished. and there are no more slaves in the world. But our Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, was prophesied that slavery will be in the world in the end time, in Akhir Zaman. The angel Gabriel, Jibreel alayhi salam, came to him in the form of a human being. And this was just before he died. And the angel came into the masjid in front of everybody and sat in front of him and asked him 5 questions. And he answered the 5 questions. And the angel said, "You are correct." And we were astonished. Who is this man who questioned the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, and then to confirm that he's correct? Is he some kind of a school principal? And nobody knew who is this man. And when he left, the Prophet said, "This was Jibreel alayhi salam. He came to teach you your religion." And when we look at the 5 questions which the great angels asked, and the answers which he gave, the Prophet gave, Allah's blessing be upon him, not only do we locate in it the vital importance, the strategic importance of Islamic eschatology, of the study of the end time, but we also find out that there is slavery in the end time, because the angel asked a question about what are the signs, the alamatus sa', what are the signs of the last day? And our Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, answered and said, among other things, that a slave woman would give birth to her mistress, indicating that there is slavery in the end time. It may not be legally recognized as slavery according to their law, but it is factual slavery, actual slavery. And at the heart of that system of slavery is, of course, the monetary system and the banking system, which is saturated with riba. Keep on, go ahead.
Exactly. So true. And that actually leads me further to ask you. I have some questions, and you are always talking about the 2 types of ayat in the Quran. And also
Yes.
there is something called basira in Quran. So some things we have to research, we have to do the research, and we have to use our inner light. We have to work to make that inner light glow and understand Quran and Hadith in context. And also the study of the Quran and the ayahs is like stars, like you've been teaching us. And not everybody gets that gift. You have to work for it. And that's also the reason your book, Jerusalem in the Quran, and how you have actually managed to understand which city Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about, Jerusalem, although it's not directly mentioned. So can I just ask you a question, Sheikh? You said the modern state of Israel was made possible through Dajjal and Gog and Magog, right? And today's scholars are taking the most scholars which I've listened to speak very literal about Dajjal and Gog and Magog. So my question to you is, how can Muslims recognize and resist this Dajjalic world in order, like in practical terms, in daily lives, for our Scandinavian viewers and also the European viewers? Can you please explain?
You have posed a very difficult question, Waheed. And it's not easy to answer that question in a brief span of time. At the heart of the subject of Dajjal is the hadith in which our Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, said Every prophet has warned his people about Dajjal. And the prophet Noah, Nuh alayhi salam, warned his people about Dajjal. But I am going to tell you something about Dajjal no one has ever said before me. And he went on to say that Dajjal sees with one eye, the left eye, and he is blind in the right eye. It looks like a bulging grape. But your Lord is not one eye. Between his eyes on his forehead is written the word kafir, kaf, fa, ra. And every mu'min, meaning everyone who has faith in his heart, would be able to read kafir, whether that mu'min is katib or ghayru katib, whether he is literate or he is illiterate. So we ask the question, why is it that Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, if he sees Dajjal, he will be able to read the word kafir on his forehead. But if Abu Lahab were to see Dajjal, Abu Lahab will not be able to read the word kafir. So let us send Abu Lahab to the optician or to the ophthalmologist. Examine his eyes. What's wrong with his eyes? Why is it that Abu Lahab, who does not have faith in his eyes, why is it that he cannot read? But the report comes back from the optician that Abu Lahab's eyesight is perfect, 20/20 vision. Well, then why can't he read? But this one can read, but this one cannot read. That is the question. And the answer we offer is that there is nothing wrong with his external sight. Allah says in the Qur'an, will they not travel to the earth? Perchance that by traveling, their dead hearts might come alive. And Allah goes on to say, it's not the heart which is blind. No, it is not the eyes which are blind. Sorry. It is not the eyes which are blind. No, it is the heart which is inside the chest. That is blind. In other words, the Quran is telling us that we have two ways of seeing. We have external sight and we have internal sight. And from this, it is possible for us to now interpret this hadith. And we gave this interpretation 20-something years ago, that when a Dajjal sees with his left eye, this symbolizes external sight. He's good in his external sight. He's excellent in all knowledge which comes from external observation, scientific inquiry, experimentation. But when Dajjal is blind in his right eye, it symbolizes internal blindness. And the mu'min can see because the mu'min can see with his eye, his heart. And the kafir cannot see because he's internally blind. And therefore, the warning which has come from this hadith, from this prophecy, is epistemological. That the most dangerous attack that will come from Dajjal is not the attack in the world of money, not in the banking system, not in the feminist revolution. the most dangerous attack of all which has come from Dajjal will be epistemological, an attack on our capacity for internal knowledge, knowledge which is internally received. And this is the problem with Islamic eschatology today and with most of the Ummah of our Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, and the most of mankind. The world is comprised of two kinds of people today. There are those who have eyes and can see, and Waheed, there are those who have eyes and yet cannot see. I cannot give sight to the blind. For that world of Islamic scholarship, which still cannot realize that Dajjal is the one who brought modern Western civilization into being, that it is through Dajjal that the world got Pax Britannica and Pax Americana, and we are now witnessing the emergence of Pax Judaica. For that world of Islamic scholarship, which cannot realize it, my response, Waheed, I am sad to say so, I cannot give sight to the blind.
Of course, Maulana. And this is Unfiltered Muslim, and I totally agree with you. And so I just have to ask you this: why do you think they are overlooking like the mainstream scholarship? Why are they overlooking this question? Even when the Ummah is waking up, the Ummah is waking up. Me as a normal person, I'm not an alim, I'm not an ulama, and we can see this.
I wish I knew the answer, Waheed. Maybe the generation that comes after me, when Allah calls me away from this world, might be able to answer you more extensively than I can. But at this time, I want our listening audience to remember, our viewing audience to remember, that our Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, made a prophecy pertaining to Islamic scholarship. It's a hadith which is located in the Sunan of Tirmizi. And I hope I'm not wrong that it was narrated by Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. If I'm wrong, kindly correct me. He said, Yushiku an ya'ti ala nasi zaman. It will not be long before that time will come. La yabqa min al-Islami lasmu, when nothing will remain of Islam but the name. The banana is gone. Only the fig leaf, the banana skin remains. Nothing will remain of Islam but the name. وَلَا يَبْقَى مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ إِلَّا رَسْمُهُ. And although the Qur'an is still in the world, all that remains of the Qur'an is the external form. It is mechanically recited. It is not studied. It is not understood. He went on to say about that age, مَسَاجِدُهُمْ آمِرَةٌ وَهِيَ خَرَابٌ مِنَ الْهُدَى. That the masajid, plural of masjid, would be grand structures, multi-million-dollar buildings, but devoid of guidance. Devoid of guidance. So if you are impressed by numbers, yes, the masjid is packed, but there is no guidance. But then he went on to say about that age, and these grand masjid filled with people, but no guidance. He said, ulama'uhum, that the religious scholars of Islam at that time, the Maulanas, the Shuyukh, the Muftis, the Ustad, Ulama'uhum sharrun nas. They would be the worst of all people. Sharrun nas mimman tahta adib sama. The worst people beneath the sky. من عندهم تخرج الفتنة وفيهم تعود. They will be the centers of corruption, responsible for the corruption of the Ummah. Our critics rush to argue this hadith is da'if. This hadith cannot be accepted. Whereas there are others of us who say, but this is exactly what we live with today. Our Prophet has spoken the truth. And so I am offering to you, Waheed, one possible explanation. And that is, we are living today in the age prophesied by our Prophet that this day will come when the scholars of Islam will be the worst people beneath the sky. The question still remains, well, how did they reach to that status? What is it that caused them to become like this? Then one possible answer, when this cannot be an answer that is valid for all of them, one possible answer is that the way you make your bed, you will sleep in it. The way you make your bed, you will sleep in it. If you betray the truth, one day you'll pay the price for that betrayal. I think I would want to stop there because the rest of the answer takes us into a long discussion on methodology for the study of the Quran and what is the role of the Darul Uloom today in the world of Islamic scholarship.
Okay. Let's jump to my next question. Thank you so much, Sheikh. You interpret the verse about a town they shall not return to until Gog and Magog, and are released as referring to, like, this city is referred to as Jerusalem. How did you arrive at this conclusion, Sheikh? In the book,
I have to thank Allah. I have to thank Him that when I completed my first degree at the Alimi Institute of Islamic Studies, it was called the degree of Al-Ijaza Al-Aliyah. And my teacher was so impressed that he gave me the Dr. Ansari Gold Medal for high merit. But my teacher wanted me to remain with him to do the next degree, which was the Kamil, or the Majid, the MA degree, master's degree. But I was young and foolish, and I was rushing. Hurry, I want to go back home. I want to go back home. I want to be with my mother. My mother was ill. And my teacher could not convince me otherwise. And so I said goodbye to him at the age of 29. But when I went to say goodbye to him, I'm flying back home, he put his hand like this. He says, I want you to go back home and your hand must be like this, not like this. Meaning, don't go and become an imam in a masjid and giving khutbah. And once you give a khutbah they don't like, they fire you. So now you are now, because you are dependent on this salary, you have to dance to any tune they play. I want you to go and get a job, earn your livelihood independently, so you're going to have the freedom to do the work of Islam. So I went back to Trinidad at the age of 29, and I applied for a job in the foreign ministry. Allah guided me to do that. And I was interviewed for the job by a panel. And they said, yes, we would like to have you in the foreign ministry. but we want to send you back to university. We'll give you a scholarship to study international relations. That came from Allah. I didn't plan that. If I had not gone back to university to study international relations, I could not have written Jerusalem in the Quran. When I went back to university to study international relations, it was my good fortune that I didn't go to a British university. It was my good fortune I didn't go to an American university to study international relations and diplomacy and so on. Allah's kindness to me. I was spared that. The Trinidad and Tobago government had entered into an agreement with the Swiss government for the Graduate Institute of International Studies in Geneva, which is the oldest and most famous institution in Europe, to establish a branch in Trinidad to train diplomats. This was the brilliance of our Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Williams. He didn't want diplomats trained in the United States or trained in Britain. No. So when the Swiss government got the Graduate Institute to establish a branch in Trinidad, that institute ran this branch for an initial period of years until it was mature enough for the government of Trinidad and Tobago to appoint their own director, take over local control of the institute, which is for training diplomats for the whole Caribbean. And our Prime Minister showed such brilliance. He chose a man who was from Haiti, who had done his PhD at the Sorbonne in France, and who was anti-systemic in his thinking, like Haiti. Professor Dr. Leslie Manigat was no Yankee puppy dog. He was an independent thinker, an independent scholar, and he was able to deconstruct Western civilization and expose its oppression and exploitiveness. And when I sat down in the classroom with this man teaching me, my gosh, Waheed, it was like a fish in water. The training I got in Pakistan from Maulana Fadlur Rahman, the insight I had got from the Quran, the philosophy I had studied at Karachi University, in particular Dr. Iqbal's reconstruction of religious thought in Islam. I went into the classroom with all of that knowledge. And I spent 1 year of my life studying with this man, Professor Leslie Manigat, studying international politics, international economics, the history of international relations, diplomacy. And this was the best teacher I could ever get. After that 1 year, I came first in the class. And nobody laughed anymore at a Pakistani graduate. They didn't laugh. And I got a scholarship to go and do the PhD in Geneva. When I went to Geneva, I couldn't find any professor equal to those I left behind in Trinidad. None. The director of the institute became my thesis director. And he said to me, Imran, he treated me like a son, Professor Jacques Fremont. He said, listen, this thesis topic that you have chosen, post-Caliphate Islam and the search for a new Islamic public order, a new model of a state and a new model of an international system. There was no one in Geneva to direct such a thesis. None. So he said to me, search the world of Islam And when you find a scholar who can direct this thesis, we will invite him to do it. And I spent 5 years in Geneva writing that thesis. Thank Allah I never defended it. Because in order to write a thesis on the post-Caliphate Islam and the search for an Islamic public order, you are dealing with Akhirul Zaman. So therefore you're dealing with Islamic eschatology. And there was no Islamic eschatology in the world at that time. No. One of the best scholars we had of Islam and international politics was Dr. Kaleem Siddiqui. And Kaleem Siddiqui loved me like a younger brother. And Kaleem Siddiqui was in London and I was in Geneva. So I had contact with Dr. Kaleem Siddiqui. It was he who said to me, Imran, you have been trained by Maulana Dr. Ansari. You are studying Islam and international relations. I want you to write this book, Jerusalem and the Qur'an. And you have to go to the Qur'an and the Hadith to show that Jerusalem is center stage in Islam international relations in the end time. And I spent 27 years before I could write that book. I left Geneva. I came back to Trinidad. I worked in the foreign ministry for 5 years. But all these years were spent in pioneering Islamic eschatology. At the end of it, I was able to write Jerusalem in the Quran. And it was Allah's guidance to let me do it. This is the explanation behind my book, Jerusalem, the Quran. I have one more thing to say. And that is, I could not have written Jerusalem in the Quran without Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, without his reconstruction of religious thought in Islam. And I could not have done it without Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari and his methodology for the study of the Quran. The Prophet said, Allah's blessings be upon him, my ummah is like the rain. I don't know which shower is better, the first or the last. From this prophecy, we know that there is a last shower of rain coming for this ummah. And that last shower of rain can be comparable to the first shower, if not better. That's what he said. And I have explained that that shower of rain would have a military component. And we have seen Afghanistan. We have seen Afghanistan fighting the Soviet Union, fighting Britain, and fighting the United States, all successfully. We have seen Iran taking the most powerful regime in the world of Islam, of the Shah of Iran. And with a million shuhada, Iran winning freedom. We have seen Iran standing up with courage and resisting Israel. So yes, there is a military component in that last shower of rain, and we are seeing it. But there is also an intellectual component, a new scholarship to come. And that new scholarship to come in the last shower of rain. It is my opinion, Waheed, and no one needs to accept my opinion unless you are convinced that it is correct. It is my opinion, it is not Islamic scholarship which is capable of recognizing the reality, the internal reality of modern Western civilization. It is in that Islamic scholarship that you see the last shower of intellectual rain. And when we look at the world of Islamic scholarship for the last 100, 200 years, the most prominent name of all from the world of Islamic scholarship, which is able to successfully penetrate the reality of modern Western civilization, is Dr. Muhammad Iqbal. And the most important student of Iqbal is my teacher, Maulana Dr. Muhammad Fadlur Rahman Ansari. So Waheed, I have inherited a model of scholarship, which is perhaps linked to the last shower of rain.
Inshallah, Sheikh. Inshallah. Many young Muslims in Europe are very confused about Palestine and also now the war in Iran, but basically Palestine, and many are afraid of speaking out. And they're also maybe a little bit unsure about their faith because of this situation and also the lack of scholarship, as you're mentioning. How would you advise young European Muslims, to advise them to understand Jerusalem's role in the Ummah's awakening?
My advice to Muslims in the West is that I was in the United States of America. I had an American green card. I had a very high profile and constantly rising in the United States. But when 9/11 took place, I realized that I would no longer have the freedom that I had in the United States. I had such freedom in the United States that at the State University of New York in Stony Brook, before a large gathering, I was able to recite the hadith of the Prophet, لَتُقَاتِلُنَّ الْيَهُودَ, that you will most certainly fight the Jews. And while I was reciting the hadith, the Jews were sitting in the audience in front of me. This was the United States. لَيُقَاتِلُنَّ الْيَهُودَ وَلَتَقْتُلُنَّهُمْ, and you will defeat them. حَتَّى يَقُولُ الْحَجَرُ. At that time, the oppression of the state of Israel and of the Jews was sunk to such depths of depravity, so much oppression, that even the stones and the rocks would speak. Today, New York has just voted for a mayor. He will probably become the mayor in November. And New York voted for a young man, just 33 years of age, a Muslim, who was denouncing Israeli oppression. And he won the Democratic primary. He defeated the establishment. And the United States is moving in that direction. Trump, you better wake up. You better wake up, Trump. The United States is changing its views so that at that time oppression would reach such a level that even the rocks and the stones will speak. Ya Muslim, هذا يهودي وراي فتعال فاقتل. There's a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him. I explained to the audience, our Prophet is not saying to kill every Jew. No, that is in conflict with the Qur'an. Our Prophet is speaking about those Jews who support the state of Israel and who are oppressors. When I finished my lecture, the Jews at the university went to the vice chancellor, the rector, to complain against me. And our response was, if we do not have the freedom in the United States to quote the word of Prophet Muhammad, Allah's blessing be upon, come on, tell us so we don't have the freedom. The university did nothing to me. This was the freedom I had in the United States. I didn't have this freedom in Pakistan. No. When I went to a television house in Pakistan. They wanted to do some recording. I can't remember the name of the television station. When I went there, they gave me a form to sign. And when I read the form, the form said you cannot criticize the Pakistan Armed Forces. I handed the form back to them. I said, I'll never sign that. They said to me, every scholar who has come here, including Dr. Isra, everyone has signed it. I said, I'm not going to sign that. I am not going to sign away my freedom. So I had freedom in the United States. But when 9/11 took place, I realized within an hour or two, I was present in New York. I was present at JFK International Airport on that morning of 9/11. And I realized within 2 hours that this was a false flag act of terrorism, and this was a replica of what happened in the summer of 1914, which was scripted to give us the First World War. So I said, I can't remain in the United States anymore. I don't have freedom in this country. 2 weeks after 9/11, I left. And I have never returned to the United States. 25 years have passed. Where will I get my roti? How will I earn my livelihood? I didn't bother about that. My freedom was more important to me than living comfortably in the West. So my answer to those who are living in the West, your freedom to speak is more important than the comfort of living in the West. Leave the West if you cannot speak with freedom and search for a part of the world where you can live with freedom to speak.
Thank you, Sheikh. Thank you. In the book, you say also that true Muslims will never accept the state of Israel. How should European Muslims or Western Muslims navigate this belief in a society where support for Israel is actually politically expected?
When you turn to Islamic eschatology, you get the answer that oppression in the Holy Land, is not going to end. We already know that there will be no such agreement where Jews and Christians and Muslims can possibly live in fraternity on the basis of political equality. That will never happen. But that does not mean that we cannot advocate it. Of course, we know it's not possible. But where a society in which Hindus and Muslims can live together in fraternity and on the basis of political equality, that was what Muhammad Ali Jinnah wanted. Yes. And that is what the Indian National Congress rejected. And today, India now has the fruit of that rejection. Instead of an India in which there's fraternity, in which there's an India, you now have a Modi, which is giving a supremacist notion of Hinduism. And they want to rule over the rest of people. And this Hindu supremacism is similar to Israel's born, we are chosen people. We are the chosen of the Lord God. So in the Jewish eyes of those who support the state of Israel, the Palestinian Muslims and Christians have a status which is less than human. This is less than human. So they don't have any problem with killing babies in order for Israel to become Pax Judaica. We can kill babies. We can kill babies. We can kill babies to make Israel the ruling state in the world. That is the fruit of this falsehood. The falsehood accepted by Modi and the falsehood accepted by Israel. So we have no problem with advocating an Israel or a state of Israel in the Holy Land, whatever name you call it, in which there is the fraternity of the faith, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and the three communities living on the basis of political equality. We have no problem with that, but they will never accept that because their objective is Pax Judaica, that we must rule the world.
You've also emphasized the importance of studying Surah Al-Kahf. And how does it spiritually prepare young Muslims? Surah Al-Kahf, studying of the Surah Al-Kahf, how could it spiritually prepare young Muslims to confront the reality of Jerusalem and the Dajjalic system, Sheikh?
I'm glad that you asked that question because this is my favorite subject. The Prophet said, Allah's blessing be upon him, I leave behind me two things. And biryani is not one of them. He said, I leave behind two things. If you hold on to them, you'll never go astray. The first is the Qur'an. The second is one in which the Shia differ with us. And we say it is the Sunnah of the Prophet, and this is supported by the Qur'an. In kuntum tuhibbun Allah fattabi'uni yuhbibkum Allah. If you love Allah, follow me. Allah will love you. The Sunnah. But the Shia say, no, it's the Ahlul Bayt. But that's a difference between us. But number one is the Quran. Number one is the Quran. And the Quran is absolute truth. وَإِنَّهُ لَحَقُّ الْيَقِينِ. Absolute truth. And it is the function of the Quran to sit in judgment over everything else, including the hadith and including the tafsir. So we have to study the Quran. It is to the credit of Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, because he didn't study in a Darul Uloom, that he studied the Quran differently from contemporary Islamic scholarship. And when you read the reconstruction of religious thought of Islam, you will see a different model of scholarship at work. Waheed, I hope that Allah will give me life and time to teach a class, inshallah, online, in which I'll teach this book, The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam. But before I can teach Dr. Iqbal's book, I have to first study it again and again. I did it when I was a master's degree student at the Karachi University. And it is not only necessary to study the Quran with the proper methodology which came from Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari, but more than that, which is my contribution to knowledge now, is that I have now recovered this lost branch of knowledge. I thank Allah for it. That you cannot study the Quran, forget it. You cannot study the Quran unless and until you are reciting the Quran every day. Qira'atul Quran, Qira'atul Quran. And you have to recite the Quran the way that Allah recited it to Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu. And this is in Surah Al-Qiyamah. فَإِذَا قَرَأْنَاهُ. And when I have recited this Quran to you, O Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, فَاتَّبِعْ Qur'ana. You must follow that way of reciting. And I have taught the subject in my book, The Quran and the Moon. You have to recite the correct juz of the Quran every day. And you have to khatam the Quran every month. I do it myself. And many of my students are doing it. MashaAllah. So if you want, as a young person, if you want to study the Quran for that guidance, I ask you, go and study my book, The Quran and the Moon, and follow what I've taught in that book and recite the Quran the way that Allah recited the correct juz of the Quran every day. Khatam the Quran every month. Then you can move to the second stage. And that is, you're not only going to recite the Quran, but you now want to ensure you understand what you're reciting. The first stage is to recite, whether you understand or you don't. This is the first stage. If you don't understand what you're reciting, then the second stage is to learn enough of the language to understand what you're reciting. But do the first stage first. Do the first stage first, and then do the second stage. When you understand what you're reciting, and you're reciting the Quran every day, then you fall in love with the Quran. This girl is only 17 years of age. She's given up the hijab. She's in university. She's dancing with the West. And then the same girl, because she read the Quran and the Moon, and she's now reciting this Quran. This same girl has now fallen in love with the Quran. Waheed, when you fall in love with the Quran, then the Quran will teach you. The Quran will teach you. The Quran will become your teacher. And if you read my books on Islamic eschatology, if you study my teacher's book, The Quranic Foundation and Structure of Muslim Societies, if you study Dr. Iqbal's book, The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam, and if you do your homework, tomorrow you're going to be a part of the last shower of rain. Okay, we're here. We've had a long session already.
We had a long session already. Can I just ask you one last question, Sheikh?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. You mentioned that some Jews may eventually accept the Quran as truth, right? And
No,
but
I didn't say that.
okay,
This
sorry.
is what Allah said. وَمِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ, amongst the Jews of the Christians, وَمِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ لَمَنْ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ, there are those who will have faith in Allah. وَمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكُمْ وَمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْهِمْ, and who will believe in the Quran, even though they still remain Jews and they still remain Christians, because they are still Ahlul Kitab. Allah says they believe in the Quran. And when a Jew or a Christian believes in the Quran, you will believe in Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam as his prophet. So I never went to the Christian world with boxing gloves. No, I never went to debate and say, wah, we won the debate, like sheep and cattle with nothing in your head except peanuts. I never followed that way. I went to the Orthodox Christian world a different way, a more intelligent way than that stupidness. And I took the Quran to them, and I told them what is in the Quran about themselves. And I have Christians, and not so many Jews, but many Christians now writing to me and saying to me, and saying it publicly as well, we are Christians, but we believe that the Quran is the word of God.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
This is the Quran.
Thank you so much,
I've
Sheikh.
written now the Quran and Russia's destiny. The Quran and Russia's destiny. And it is translated to Russian. And I'm waiting now for a shipment to reach Moscow of the book in English. The book is already translated and published in Moscow in Russian. And when the book reaches Moscow in English, I'll fly to Moscow, inshallah. We have the launch of the book in Moscow. And I pray to Allah that many, many Russians who are not Muslims, Christians, because of this book, inshallah, will now study the Quran and will tomorrow accept the Quran as the word of God. That does not mean you have to give up Christianity and join this Ummah. Stop that nonsense. They can continue to follow Jesus and yet believe that the Quran is the word of God. May Allah grant that it may come to pass.
Ameen. Ameen. Summa ameen. Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
I
You're
was
welcome.
honored.
Okay.
Yes, and I just want to say one last thing to the audience who's listening. Like me, I'm just a normal Muslim. I'm not a scholar, but I urge everyone to watch Sheikh's lectures, go to his website, read his books, and study them, and not only read them but also act upon them, because like they say, tinke se darya banta hai. Like each drop counts in the ocean. Each drop counts in the ocean, and we are not powerless. We are not powerless. We have the knowledge. We just have to use our power and be like Sheikh. Just stand, have taqwa, and just do whatever we can. The little you do, inshallah, will grant you so much success into the ummah. And we have to do this also for the whole
Ameen.
dunya.
Thank you, Waheed.
Inshallah.
We are both in the same boat, Waheed. It's called the boat of unfiltered Muslims. Okay. Assalamu
Thank
alaikum.
you. Wa alaikum assalam.